Alright, what's up, people? Here we are. It's a new day. It's the 11th, and we're going to do a little hour session. So let's do the thing. And pull this stream up here. A little hour session. My sleep schedule has been so fucked, dude. Man, it's been rough. Not even gonna lie. Alright, cool, it's working. So I tested the audio, so it should be good. Alright, so yesterday, let's set our timer. So let's set it to 67. Alright, timer set, and extensions are good. We don't need to reset any of those. Now, picking up where we left off yesterday, we stopped at line 98 in the save logic. Right there, I can see. What did we do exactly? Well, we reviewed an all modified code in stable save state function. We continued second pass revision. Specifically, we created and began implementation. Yeah, I spelled that wrong. Implementation of vacuum into integrity check recreate function in save logic to replace repeated code in stable save state function. Okay, yeah, we should. So yeah, we created the vacuum into integrity check recreate function, and we began to replace the repeated code in stable save state function with that newly created function. So let's get rid of that. Alright, so now we need to recreate the SQLite 3 connect code. We'll have to determine what this database should be called, i.e. database 2 or database 3, depending on the target path. Right, so if the target path, like if stable, well, I guess we could check to see if backup is in the target path, because if the word backup is in the target path, then that means we're dealing with the backup. If it's not, that means we're just dealing with stable. So yeah, let's do that. I think that's an easy way to check that. I mean, we could like pass that as a argument, but I don't know. It's sort of like 50-50. It doesn't really matter if we pass it as an arg. Like, if we just passed 2 or 3, and then we could just say if such and such arg is 2, then assign this to database 2. If it's 3, assign it to database 3. I feel like I don't know. It's just like probably more performant to just pass as an arg and check that. So I think we'll do it like that. So then we're going to say we're going to have a new parameter. The parameter is going to be called database namespace. Well, we'll just say DB2 or 3. Yeah, that'll work. So we're going to have a third parameter. We have target, source cursor, target path, and then we have this new one, which is called DB2 or 3. And the type is going to be an integer. And then the purpose is going to be the int to determine the namespace assigned to the SQLite 3.connect. The int to determine the namespace assigned to the SQLite 3.connect snippet or code. Yeah, the int determined the namespace under the SQLite code, and then we'll just say this is for DB2 versus DB3. Yeah, there we go. All right, so it's the int to determine the namespace under the SQLite 3 DB2 versus DB3. Yeah, that's what we want. So we'll just say if DB2 or 3 is equal to 2, then in this case we would do SQLite 3 connect. We'll say DB2 equals SQLite 3 connect, and then we're going to create a this since we just created a new database file, we're now going to create a SQLite connection to that database file. We're assigning it to the DB2 namespace because DB refers to save data, and now this DB2 will refer to stable. Yeah, and if we were vacuuming into stable, or vacuuming into backup rather, then the DB2 or 3 would be 3, and in that case it would be DB3 equals SQLite 3 connect. And what are we connecting to? Well, we're connecting to the database 2 or no, we're connecting to the target path, right? Yeah, the path. Let's see if we can find this code. So let's copy this. Alright, so we have DB2 equals SQLite 3 connect, and then we pass in this case, save file stable. So what we'll do is we're just going to pass in the target path, and then we're going to set the isolation level equal to none. And this will create the DB file if it doesn't exist. Isolation level equals none enables auto commit. Verified this does work via testing and test reminders. And I don't actually know about that, so get rid of that part. So now we can. Okay, there we go. So if database 2 or 3 is equal to 2, then DB2 would be assigned target path. Apparently I hit M instead of comma. And then we go over here and we can say else, which is the same as saying elif db2 or 3 is equal to 3. And this would be set to db3. So else if db2 or 3 is equal to 3. Then we say db3 is equal to SQLite 3 connect target path isolation level none blah blah blah. Yeah, there you go. That's good. So that part is done. And this needs to be done at the base level like that. So first off, we are vacuuming into the target path, so from save to stable, and then we're creating the actual database connection to that newly created file. So we use the target path and assign it to 2 or 3 depending on what that db2 or 3 argument is set to. And then we have to recreate the target cursor. And so we use cursor stable. So if it's database 2, we would then say cursor stable equals, how do we do this again? Do we say db2.cursor like so? Yeah, that's how you do it. It's cursor stable equals db2.cursor. Alright. There you go. And then we would have, if it was for db3, it would be cursor stable backup, right? Yeah, cursor stable backup. And this would be db3 cursor. So you have to be really careful and make sure you get those numbers right. Okay, so we recreated the cursor as well. And now we have to recreate the table because this is a new database, so it needs to have a table that's created. So we're going to use the cursor to execute that SQLite command. So let's say cursor stable dot execute, and then we'll say create table. Isn't that what we say? Create table if not exists, and then it's going to be called save data. Or wait, we don't have to create the table because vacuuming should have transferred all that, right? Yeah. Yeah, vacuuming into would have created the table. So I don't think we actually have to recreate the table. We do have to recreate the connection in the cursor though. But we don't have to recreate the table. The table should already be done. Let me just verify this. Let's ask the God for validation concerning this. So we'll say Python SQLite 3 if we use vacuum into to copy a DB to another DB file. Does the table and all contents get copied, or do we have to recreate the table manually? And I feel like this is a dumb question, just asking it. It feels like obviously it's going to already be done. When using the vacuum into command SQLite 3, all tables and their contents are copied to the new database file. You do not need to manually recreate the tables. Connect to your original database, use vacuum into, and then close. This will create a new SQLite file called copies. It copies all schema tables used indexes triggers, and it copies all the data from the original database. Yeah, cool. Okay, vacuum into is introduced. Destination file copy overrun if it already exists. Cool. Okay, so that's taken care of. So what do we need to do now? And this being created inside of the function will still allow it to be available to the global namespace, right? I'm pretty sure. I always get confused about this. This is just one of those things that I have trouble remembering. So let's do, we'll create a function called f to test this, and then we'll just say x equals 1. And then we'll say print x in the global namespace. Now, if, well, we need to call the function first. So if we then call f and want to print x, does x actually exist? Let's run it and see. Okay, no, it says x doesn't exist actually. Well, how come it allowed us to do this? Didn't it allow us to do that concerning cursor? Or was it we could reference cursor inside of the function? I think that's what it was. It was the opposite. Yeah, it was the opposite. It was this case where we create cursor on the global scope, and then we reference cursor inside of the function in the function scope, but it knows that we're referring to the global cursor because there isn't a local one. So it looks in the local and then it looks in the global namespace. But in this case, we would be doing something completely different, and that would be creating it in the local namespace, and it's not going to be available to the global after its creation. So what we would have to do, well, couldn't we just say global cursor stable? And let's see. Actually, instead of asking, I would just rather test this. So we'll do def x, and then we'll say global x equals 1, and then let's see what happens now. Okay, that's saying global, that's saying invalid syntax, so we can't use global in that way. How to assign a global variable from a function. To assign a global variable from within a function in Python, you use the global keyword inside the... This modifies global x. Okay, without global, it creates a local. Gotcha. So if I did global x, even though there is no like global x, is this going to throw an error? Okay, so it doesn't. You can call the global keyword on a variable that doesn't exist yet. But if we try to do global y, then we get an error because x is not defined. So yeah, you can actually do it this way. Is it kind of ghetto? Yeah, I mean, technically we could return, but we don't want it to return at this point unless we returned the cursor at the end of the function. But honestly, I think it would be better to just like use the global keyword. Well, because we also need to do this for database 2 and database 3 as well, don't we? Yeah, I think so. Because database 2 and database 3 get assigned Well, wait a second. Doesn't this mean that this code is wrong? Doesn't that mean, yeah, that means this code is not going to work, right? Because this is just a local, this happens locally. Yeah, so if I were to try to run this code, it wouldn't work. Let's test it. So let's comment this out real quick and then paste that in. So save DB setup. Now we have, well, we need to import, let's just say import SQLite 3. And now we're going to do def save DB setup, DB equals SQLite 3 connect, DB save file, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then if we call that function, and then we say print DB, it's not going to know what DB is. Or wait, we have to... No, this creates the database file if it doesn't exist. Unable to open database file. So I'm a little bit confused right here by this. I thought it would have created that. Huh. Let me try to rerun this. $6541 database equals SQLite 3 dot connect database save file dot db. Okay. Is it because of the way we have it written? Let's try this without that. Oh, you know what? I know why. It was because I know exactly why it was throwing the error. I know. It's because I'm an idiot and I was running this from the VS Code editor instead of running it through the terminal from the proper directory. So let's do Canasta /testing, and then we're gonna do pi test reminders, and now it works. Okay, and let's run it again. Okay, so it does allow you to create this database file, as you can see. So we just deleted it, and let's rerun it and see if it works. Okay, so now let's go look at DB and see if it exists there. Alright, so it does exist. Just to triple check, run it again, and then bam, you can see it shift down, so you know that it did indeed create this new database file. Alright, but it's telling us database is not defined. That's because this is happening at the local level, and then we're referencing it in the global namespace. Well, this is kind of confusing. Let me see, because don't we do the same thing? Oh, it's because they're all attached to objects. So that's thus object-oriented programming allows us to See, yeah, everything is happening in terms of object-oriented programming. So that's why all this is attached to class instances. So, like, in that case, it becomes available in the quote unquote global namespace because it is directly attached uh, to whatever class instance or whatever that we're dealing with. Um, so that's why it works in setup, but it's not going to work in this context because database isn't part of it's not like a class instance or whatever. So let's see here. So what do we need to do? Like what's the smart way to solve this problem? Because it's currently this code is not going to work. Let me put a note here. Yeah, so we have two options here, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think there's a way around this. We would either have to do what we did here and say global such and such and then assign it. Um, and then it would be available to the global namespace, or which is probably considered more quote unquote Pythonic and is I would say this method is a little bit ghetto. Um, it's not really the way that you're supposed to do this, so I would shy away from using that method. It would be frowned upon by the community if I did it like that. So, I mean, it is more code, but I think we should probably just go ahead and create a class called database and have these functions be methods. I guess would be the way to do this. So yeah, we're gonna have to, let me actually copy this part and then we can get rid of that, blah blah blah. All right, so we would say, let's put this comment first. And I'll just say save system. Need to create database class for the function variable assignments to be available in other functions or the global namespace. And I'm pretty sure the Python convention for class naming is camel case. I think it is. Yep, the Python convention for class naming is camel case, more specifically cap words style. According to PEEP8, class names should normally use the cap words convention. So we have my class, game manager, HTTP request handler. Other quick naming conventions. So for variables, functions, you would use snake case, constants is all caps, and then modules, packages, lowercase with underscores. Okay. Yeah. So we would do class, database, and then we would do, is this how you do that? Then we would just say def init. So I think shit. So then we would say def underscore def under init self, and then we're gonna have I guess we would just say pass, because we don't want to put that inside of the init. These are going to be methods. So then we would just go down here and see how quick a file grows into. It happens pretty quick, man. There we go. So all this now is going to be a method, or are going to be methods instead of just straight up functions. So now we have self. This is going to need to take in the self, I believe. I think all of these are going to have to take in self. And you know, I don't think we actually even need to make the like is there a point in creating the stable and backup files initially, or shouldn't we just let them be created whenever the first checkpoint or whatever happens? Because we're not going to be able to use them for anything, you know? Like there's no purpose in having them just be empty databases. Yeah, so I would say we don't need to do that. We don't need to create them. But that does mean in the let's see, in the function, well, does it copy the journal mode and all that already? Let's see about that. If we use vacuum into another DB file, and the original pragma settings were not default? Are the settings transferred to the copy as well? Most Pragma settings are not transferred to the new database when you use vacuum into. So when you run vacuum into copy DB, SQLite creates a new database and copies the schema and data, but settings that are part of the schema like user version, application ID are copied. Settings that are environment-based or per connection, like Pragma journal mode, synchronous, foreign keys, cache size, are not copied. These remain at their defaults in the new database file unless explicitly changed. Okay. Yeah, so that's... I actually kind of expected that. But it is what it is. Let's go ahead and get rid of this because we don't need this at all. We just need it to create the initial database. We don't need it to create the other cursors because those are only going to be created whenever we hit a checkpoint and we create the stable and backup. So we can get rid of these as well. That makes this a lot cleaner. Now, this is referencing cursor. I'm kind of scattered here. Let me get my shit together. I need to have self be passed to this function as well now. So we have self, object name, and data. So we're just going to go through each one of these and pass in self. I'm like 1000% certain we have to pass self to these methods. Does self have to be passed to class method? This is like a Python 101. Yes, for instance methods in a class, self must be passed as the first parameter. It's how the method gets access to the instance. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then we just keep on going, and we have this one which needs the self, blah blah blah, and then this one here, so say self comma, and this one here, whoops. Okay, so we did that. We can get rid of this note. So now we have definite, which doesn't do anything. And I want these to be separated, like so. And this one does need to be tested as well. Alright, what was I doing? There was something that I was doing that like I got distracted away from. Well, I added self to all the methods, the self argument. Okay, this function is going to be wondering where what cursor refers to. So what we'll have to do is we need to create attributes such as self.cursor, self.cursor stable, and then self.cursor stable backup. and those will will solve the problem of not having access, like to that names, not having access to that assignment whenever we assign it inside of a function. So from now on, instead of just assigning, let's see, can collapse this one. So instead of assigning database2 here and cursor stable, we would instead say self.db2 equals and then self.cursor stable, and that will make it universally available through the object, the class instance, that is. So I'll just do that first, I guess. We need to finish this function. That's what I was feeling like I needed to finish doing. But I do have the note here, so I won't forget to do that. But I think first of all, we'll, do this the correct way. So we'll say we're going to have self.database, and initially these will just be set to none. Self.db2 is going to be set to none, and we're also going to have database3, and that is the right. See, whenever you it's funny how you can forget the basics when you don't do them in a while. It's weird. So we have self.db, self.db2, self.db3. We're going to need self-cursor. Cursed. Self-cursed. Fair enough. Alright. And then we have cursor stable. And then we're going to have cursor stable backup. And then we're going to have the so these are basically placeholders for now. Oh yeah, I know what I wanted. I knew what I forgot. It wasn't the finishing that function. It was this. We have to manually assign the pragma settings whenever we create the database. So right here, when we vacuum into target path, which would be stable or backup, that creates the file. We have to have the connection first, right? Yeah, we do the connection, then the cursor, then pragma. We have to have the cursor to run pragma settings, to set pragma settings, and to have the cursor, we have to have a SQLite 3 connection. So it goes connect, then cursor assignment, and then pragma settings. So here we have creation of the file, then we have connection, then we have cursor, and then we would have the pragma settings. And I'm pretty sure we could do this once instead of doing it twice. You understand what I'm saying here? I think we could just run cursor execute like after this if else. We would just have to, I mean, it's either or. It might save us 2 lines, because then we would just be able to say cursor equals, we could say cursor db3 equals SQLite 3 connect, then we would just say cursor equals db3.cursor, and this would be self.db3. So then it would be cursor equals self.db3, and then we would just do the same thing up here. So cursor would be assigned to whatever cursor, DB2 or DB3, and then after the fact, for both of them, this would get run. So we would just refer to it in the namespace of cursor, if that makes sense. And since cursor refers to the instance attribute DB2 or DB3 cursor, would this work though? I'll just put a note here. We'll figure this out. We could probably run this 1x for the if elif instead of 2x, 1x per if per elif. Yeah. So that makes sense. Damn. You could probably run this one next to the yeah, there we go. Okay, so we need to go up here to the top and say, damn. You need to go through each method and change namespace variable assignments to self.x instead of x. Yeah, so let's finish creating these placeholders first. Alright, so we have self DB, DB2, DB3, cursor, cursor stable, backup. What else do we need? vacuum into integrity check, recreate self. Okay. So we already have that. We have DB, and then we have the cursors. I feel like there's more though. What else? The database verified, not corrupted. Well, we could have the save data stable path and the backup path saved as an attribute, and then we would just reference them as such, because we could also use it to pass to this function for target path. Well, actually, this is where it's assigned for usage in that function. So I don't think there's actually another instance. Does that make sense? There's not like another place where this is used. This is the place where it's used. So we don't have to. Now, if we were going to use it somewhere else, yeah, that would make sense to do that. But if we're only going to use it right there for that one purpose, there's no reason to make it like a universally available object if it's only going to be used in one place. So thought I was tripping hearing that beeping. Apparently that's it. That's all that I have to create as far as attributes. That just doesn't seem right to me. Cursor, and then we have the database itself. I mean, I guess so. As we go through each function, it will basically let us know, though, as we go through, like what needs to be an attribute and what doesn't. So we'll just put a note here, say below section 1125 placeholders for database file, not the database file rather, but the database SQLite 3 connections. So we'll say type, this will be SQLite 3 connection, and then purpose, these are placeholder SQLite 3 are assigned in what? They're assigned through these functions. Which functions exactly? Assigned in vacuum into integrity check recreate. I feel like this has turned into a mess, dude. I don't like it. I don't think it's wrong. It's just like giving me anxiety looking at it. It got I didn't want it to be all this, but that's how it is. Can't, you know, if this is how it's got to be, this is how it's got to be. All right, so purpose placeholder DB light DB SQLite 3 connections are assigned in vacuum into integrity check recreate. All right. Yeah, that's good. So we have self DB is set to none. DB2 set to none. DB3 set to none. Then we have cursor set to none. Cursor stable set to none, and then cursor stable backup set to none. Let's copy this. So the type, what type is this? Well, SQLite 3 cursor. Purpose is placeholders for SQLite 3 cursors are assigned in vacuum. Yeah, same story. All right. So now we can go about the task of replacing each instance of database 2, database 3 with self DB so that it would be you know, universally available, or available in, you know, a different method that also needs access to that same object. So we have cursor stable backup. All right, so let's need to go through each method and change the variable assignments of self.x instead of x. That's what we're going to do right now. All right, so here we go. So save database setup takes self. This will be initially, we'll say self.db equals, and we can just copy self dot because we're going to be using that a lot, is equal to SQLite 3 connect. So now whenever we run this, this will be universally available through whatever database instance .db attribute. Yeah. And then we have self.cursor, which is equal to self.database cursor. Yeah, there we go. That's fine. And then self.cursor execute. Self.cursor execute. Yeah, this is all good, I think. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Alright, serialized data, pickle dumps, that doesn't. Visual data save function. Yeah, this would only ever happen in the context of cursor, so we're good on that. Do we not import pickle? Is that the problem here? That's what it is, dude. We not importing pickle, dog. How you gonna use pickle without importing pickle? We just say import pickle. That's why it was colored strangely. Dumbass. I should have known better. There we go. Now it's colored properly. Whenever stuff is colored white in VS Code, at least the way I have it set up, that's when I know like something's wrong with the syntax. Somewhere something is amiss if you have that going on. So where were we? We were right here. Okay, so we finished that. Self cursor execute. Yeah, that's good. We don't need to make that an attribute. This would be self.cursor, right? This is for custom append list. See, so how it's white colored before, and then it's not. Serialized cursor. If I don't have a secret card. Okay, visual. Now this would be self.visual data save function, right? So there might be an issue now associated with how we have structured our methods. That's something I get confused about still. You have to have them structured in a certain order depending on like it varies. Sometimes you can refer to something that doesn't exist yet but will exist inside of a function slash method. And then like the rules on that, I'm not absolutely certain on. I still get confused about that. Anyway, that's really neither here nor there. Checkpoint ID. We might end up making checkpoint ID an attribute. I don't know. We'll see. So this is, we're passing in, yeah, we do need to pass in source cursor. So source cursor would just be one of the attributes already. Yeah. Okay. db2, so this would change. This would be self.db2, right? Yeah, self.db2 equals SQLite3 connect target path, and then this would be self.cursor stable is equal to self.db2 cursor. Same thing here, self.db3, self.cursor stable backup would be equal to self.db3 cursor, and then here this needs to be changed. I'm gonna put those question marks back here to denote the fact that this is not final. We'll come back to that. If target cursor, now target, we don't actually, target cursor, we don't have a target cursor. Yeah, we went through this, we just never changed it. This would need to refer to well, whatever. How about this? We'll just go ahead and do it right now. So we're gonna say cursor in this function namespace is equal to self.cursor stable, because we do need to assign that cursor, the self.db2 cursor, to the self.cursor stable attribute. We might, well, yeah, because we're gonna use cursor in a lot of other like functions, or at least one other function, and for us to be able to do that, we have to have it assigned either in a global namespace or as part of a class instance as an attribute like this, so that, yeah, we can have access to it outside of that particular function or method. So this is good. We have to run this line, and then we run this line to avoid having to run this pragma setting multiple times, right? But is it worth it? Do we have an equal trade-off? Like, couldn't it would be these two lines here and then also here, so it would be 4 lines instead of, isn't it the same amount of lines? It would still be 4 lines, because if we did these 2 lines in the context of the if and then in the context of the else, that's 4 lines. Otherwise, if we did cursor equals self.cursor stable, and then here we did cursor equals self.cursor stable backup, and then right here we would still need these 2 pragma settings. That's the exact same amount of lines. So it's literally pointless to do that. So we'll just get rid of this, and what we'll do is we'll duplicate it. We'll put it here and then put it here. There you go. So now this is just going to be self.cursor stable, and then we copy this, self.cursor stable, and then here it's going to be self.cursor stable backup, and then self.cursor stable backup. Yeah, there we go. So we have, let's just review this real quick. Self DB2, then we have self cursor stable, and then we're setting the pragma settings for the cursor stable, for that stable database. And then we do the same thing except for DB3, which is associated with backup. So we do cursor stable backup. Bam. That's a lot cleaner. It looks better anyway. Okay. And now this needs to be changed. Target cursor. Well, this is sort of the same scenario where if we refer to, like, we would to refer to it as target cursor, we would have to assign target cursor, which would have to happen twice. Does that make sense? But I think we might need to do that. Otherwise, we would have to run this line, or this section rather, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. We would have to run it twice. So in that case, we would actually want to assign target cursor. So we'll say target cursor equals self dot cursor stable, and then here target cursor would be self dot cursor stable backup, and then right here we would just say if target cursor, which would vary, it's a variable. If it was not integritous, we would do OS remove, and we probably have to import OS. That's why we're getting that error. Yep, so we need to import OS, or that's why it's white. That's why it was white colored. So we're at line 111. There goes the timer. I feel like I put in work for that hour, dude. I feel like that was like an hour and a half of work. And I think it was all good. Alright, so target cursor equals self dot cursor stable. That's correct, so give it our discount double check marker. And then we have target cursor equals cursor stable backup. That one's correct as well. Target cursor execute is not okay. So if it's not okay, then we would remove the target path, and then we would use the source cursor. Okay. Vacuum into target path, else. There we go. Alright, so that's where we're gonna stop. And we're gonna go to the gym. I gotta piss so bad, dude. So I'll just put it right here. And what was I doing? I was going through cursor save. Yeah, I was going through and replacing, basically like fixing all the code in the methods to reflect the fact that they're a method now. So I'll just put that here. Actually, why is that? For 11/27. 125 stopped here. Need to finish going through each method to revise the code inside of it to reflect the fact that it is a method and not a simple function anymore, i.e. adding self dot and modifying logic. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Alright, so we stopped at line 124 in save logic. Let's go over here. Let's copy this first and say stopped at line number 124 in save logic.py, blah blah blah, and this is gonna put us at 12:28. So let's change this time, and that will be an hour and 13 minutes, which is basically an hour and a quarter. We did stable save state function revision. Is that really what we did? No, we did a lot more than that. I'll call this database. We'll call this database class creation. And method revisions, or function to method conversions. Yeah, that's a good descriptor of that, of what we did. So we created the database class and turned all of the functions inside of save logic dot, well, all the functions inside of save logic to be methods. Save logic.py to be methods of that class. It began but did not finish converting associated namespace and logic, associated namespace and logic inside of said functions, now methods. Began but did not finish converting associated namespaces and logic inside of said functions, now methods. And we stopped at line 124 in save logic. That's a good descriptor. We go over here. Oh, I gotta piss, but I'm basically done, so I'll just wait. Oh, this is wrong. This should have been 12:30. I like my shit to be precise to the, to the utmost. Okay, so let's read it. Database class creation and function to method conversions. That is the correct date, 11:15 to 12:30. That's the correct time, which is an hour and 15 minutes exactly. We created the database class, turned all the functions inside of save logic to be methods of that class. We began but did not finish converting associated namespace and logic inside of said functions, which are now methods. And we stopped at line 124 in save logic py. That is correct. We stage commit push our changes. There we go. All right, so now let's do cd out to the root of the project, which we have done. And now we can do git branch to make sure we're on the correct new feature branch, which we are. So let's do git add to stage everything. Git commit -m, double quote, paste it in, double quote. There we go. We successfully committed. We had 3 files changed, 188 insertions, 161 deletions. Now we're going to do git push. And that's going to push to our upstream remote repository, our GitHub. And that successfully did its thing. So now we can go over here to our local project directory. We'll copy this. We'll go into the backup and we'll delete the old one. Paste in this new one. go inside of it, go into text, devlog, go all the way to the end to verify it is up to date, and it is. So now we go back out here to change this date to reflect the last time it was back up locally, which is today, and that'll be it. So I'll see you guys later after I'm going to go to the gym, probably going to take a shower, almost certainly, because today's heavy bag day, so I'm going to be sweating like a pig. So yeah, I'm going to go to the gym, take a shower, probably eat a little bit, and yeah, then I'll be back and we'll do at least another hour. I'm going to try to get back to that 3-hour mark like I had been, 3 hours per day, that is. So we did 1.25 hours, so I need to do almost 3 hours, or almost 2 hours to hit the 3